couple weeks ago, my family and I took a trip to the UK. And one of the nights we were in London, we ended up in Hyde Park by a playground so the younger ones could burn off some energy. Next to the playground, a group of older kids were playing a game of soccer, or in the UK, football. My oldest wanted so badly to join, but he was nervous to ask. Then the kids kicked the ball right next to us and he kicked it back to them. They asked him if he wanted to join, so he did. They played for the next 45 minutes or so. Didn't matter that they were from different countries. The kids saw someone who could play, who wanted to play, and said, "There's room for another. Come join us." A reading from Mark chapter 8. In those days, when there was again a great crowd without anything to eat, Jesus called his disciples and said to them, "I have compassion for the crowd because they have been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some of them have come from a great distance." His disciples replied, "How can one feed these people with bread here in the desert?" Jesus asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" They said, 7. Then he ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves, and after giving thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute. And they distributed them to the crowd. They also had a few small fish, and after blessing them, he ordered that these too should be distributed. They ate and were filled, and they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. Now there were about 4,000 people. And he sent them away, and immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmathua. In our gospel text for this week, we hear another version of Jesus feeding people. This time, instead of it being on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, it's in a desert. Instead of just an afternoon, the people had been with Jesus for 3 days and had nothing to eat. Instead of a small boy giving up his lunch of 5 loaves and 2 fish, the disciples had 7 loaves between them and a few small fish. Instead of 5,000 men plus women and children, there were about 4,000. Jesus had compassion on the people and even said, "If I send them away hungry, they will faint on the way home." Now his disciples, they were like, "How can we feed this many people in the desert with no bread?" That's when Jesus asks, "Well, what do you have?" 7 loaves. 7 loaves and a few fish. The disciples say it's not enough. Jesus says, "I can work with that." It's easy to get discouraged when it feels like odds are stacked against you. I can understand why the disciples were like, "How can we feed all of these people in the middle of this desert when we have so little?" I don't know about food in your homes, but my family can eat an entire loaf of bread in one meal. 7 loaves to feed 4,000? That seems impossible. For us, yes. For Jesus, not so much. There is so much in life, though, where it seems impossible, where we feel like we're living in scarcity, where there's just not enough. Not enough money, not enough resources, or time, or space, or love. We exclude others because we feel like if we welcome them, then there won't be enough for us. We push others out because we're afraid if we widen the circles, our ideas, our traditions, the things that we hold dear will be replaced by something else. We don't show up when we feel like we don't have anything meaningful to contribute, which then leads to feelings of shame, exclusion. We don't think our voice matters, so we stop speaking. We don't feel like we'll ever get ahead, so we quit trying. We feel like there's no hope, so we stop caring. Now, in the book of Isaiah, the author writes, "If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, Then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. And you should be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall rise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. Isaiah is describing what God's reign looks like. God's reign is about people who make room, who feed the hungry and care for the afflicted, who welcome others in and create community. God's vision for the world is not just for us to have enough for ourselves, but for all of the broken parts of society to be repaired, for the lonely to find community, for the hungry to be fed, and for those who have been marginalized to find a place to belong. This passage is a beautiful reminder of God's goodness and mercy, how when we see darkness, bleakness, and no way forward, God sees possibilities. God opens doors. God shows up. I think to this past fall when many families in our community were not sure what to do when SNAP benefits were cut. This church community showed up in a big way, being the hands and feet of God for thousands. Because of your generosity, a program to feed students and families has become so much bigger than what we could have imagined. There were times when we thought, will this really make a dent in the need? Will this be enough? God said, I can feed 4,000 with 7 loaves of bread. I can work with this. This is where and how God shows up. God shows up when a meal train is created for someone who needs a little help. God shows up when someone comes into the community and brings a fresh perspective. God shows up when we welcome someone into the fold, like a group of kids letting a random American into a pickup game of football in a park. In the story of the feeding of the 4,000, the disciples weren't wondering where God was going to show up. Instead, they were lost in the logistics of how do we feed this many people? They forgot that Jesus had already fed more than 5,000 with less. We too get lost in the logistics and fail to notice where God shows up in our lives. The good news, though, is that even when we get caught in the details, God doesn't. God is already at work when we can't see it. God meets us where we are, has compassion on us, and says, let me feed you. God doesn't ask us to prove our hunger or prove that we belong. To God, we already belong. It was like that moment when my son joined the game with kids that he didn't know. He didn't know their names, nor did they know his. They didn't know his ability. They just saw he could kick a ball, and he wanted to play. So they made room for him. And then after the game, invited him to come play again with them. This is what God's love does for us. God's love sees a person who's standing on the sidelines and says, come in, you belong here. God's love makes room for all of us. God's love doesn't make us prove we belong. It invites us in because we already belong. And there's no scarcity in God's love or grace or forgiveness. There's just abundance. We may see 7 loaves and think, how can we feed that many people? Jesus sees it and says, I can work with that. Jesus doesn't need people to prove that they're hungry. He doesn't need them to prove that they belong. He just feeds them. We don't need to prove we're hungry. We don't need to prove that we belong, because Jesus has already made room for us. This is the good news for today. Thanks be to God for it. Amen. A couple of reflection questions for you to use to go deeper into the message this week, as well as a challenge, because our faith is something that we live out. So your challenge if you accept it. The first reflection question is, where in your life are you tempted to see scarcity instead of God's abundance? The second is, who might be standing on the sidelines of your life or community who's waiting for someone to say, join us. There's room for you here. And your challenge, this week, look for someone who is standing on the sidelines and make room. Maybe it's inviting someone into a conversation, sitting with someone alone, or reaching out to someone who's been absent. Tell them that there is room for them and they belong.